Live. I am a couple minutes early. I think I had this set up for 10:30. But I have like a super busy day, so I figure I will just knock this out of the way. I don't think anybody's here yet. I think I just swallowed something. Sorry. Um anyway, I guess I'll wait a minute. Maybe somebody will come in. Sorry about the plasticky sounds. I have plastic on my floor because I was doing another coat of paint on my walls behind me. So I'm using this super cool paint. It's not normal paint. It's actually what they call a lime wash paint. So it makes the walls look, I don't know, I would say a little bit aged, but I think it looks more natural. It looks more interesting. It's more like in depth. It gives it more depth or something. So that's what I'm doing in my dining room. It's super expensive though, so I'm only doing it in my dining room. All right, so I'll stop running my mouth now. So actually, I had a super awesome morning. I go to the gym now, like pretty much 5 days a week, and it started with just one other woman, one other gym partner, gym buddy, a friend of mine. Her son and my son are friends. That's how we know each other. So from the school. It started with just us, and then I started like inviting more people. And so this morning, there was like a group of us, and I ended up meeting a local business owner and his wife. And they have 7 kids, y'all, that are in my school, or 5 of them are in my kids' school. And so it just gave me so much hope. And I think like people think I'm like this exotic creature because I wear a veil. So like, of course, that's the first thing when somebody says, "Oh, I see you in church all the time." And then I'm like, yeah, haha, I need a lot of help, which isn't funny. It's the truth. That's why I'm there all the time. And they're like, "Oh, you're the one who wears the veil." And so then, of course, yeah. And also the rosary. Like people pick me out. But I was like, so they think I'm like this exotic creature or something. But I'm like, listen, like you're the future, like you're the hope of the future. They have 7 kids. Nice Italian girl. I think he's Puerto Rican, not sure. But they have 7 kids. And so when she said it, or when he said it, I forget who said it. They were like, "Oh, we have 5 in the school." You could see her face, like she was expecting. You could tell, like when she usually says she has 7 kids, the results, the reaction isn't all that pleasant usually from common folk. And so you can like, she was bracing for impact after she said it, and I was like, I just like encouraged her so much. I'm like, that is so awesome. God bless you. That is what we need. This is, I kept praising her, and she was just like, she came out of her shell after that, but she was like smiling and everything else. So whoever says there's no hope is a liar. We will take back the culture little by little by little by little, and it's going to be through the family. And so even like I see it all around me, guys. People are waking up. To whoever says, "Oh, it's too late for people," block them out. Don't listen to them. Every day I see people waking up, asking questions. One of the girls I go to the gym with, she was asking me questions this morning. She's like, "Listen, this is a situation, blah, blah, blah." I'm like, "I've been there, trust me, been there, done that." And I was like, "Listen, you have to just have some patience." And I'm like, "You got to pray the rosary." I'm like, "If you don't pray the rosary every day," I'm like, "you're not going to make it. You got to pray the rosary." And so we started talking about that. She started talking about confession, yada, yada. And I was pleasantly surprised to hear that one of our priests gave her some really, really good spiritual advice. Some really tough love. And you don't see that a lot sometimes with like a Novus Ordo parish. So that was really, really hopeful. Some good orthodox spiritual wisdom in some direction. So anyway, I'm rambling, but my point of this is kind of what I'm doing here, right? So I'm reading Anna Maria Taigi, and like, this is what I said to my friend this morning. I'm like, "Listen, like, you have to have patience with him." I'm like, we are lost. Like, men don't know how to be men. Women don't know how to be women. We don't know how to live in a family. Like, you have to have some patience. You got to pray the rosary, all stuff. And you can tell that's not what she was expecting me to say. She was expecting me to be like hardcore, like, get rid of them or whatever. And I was like, no. And like, I went through my scenario, like my whole situation. I'm like, this is what I just came out of. And I said, and this is what I did badly. And this is what I could have done better. Don't make the same mistakes that I made, basically. So anyway, the reason why we're doing this is because Again, there's not enough ordinary Catholicism advice out there. We hear, especially on YouTube, all these extraordinary things. People wanting to, it's almost like the roles have become reversed. Like the lay people are trying to be the clergy and hold the clergy accountable, and the clergy are trying to be the lay people. Like it's super weird and like fit into the world. Like the roles are reversed. Everything is backwards. And like, I just want to hear people who have a lot of kids and who are successfully living in a family give advice on how to do that. That's what we need. So not that he will ever see this, but like people like Dr. Taylor Marshall, like love what you do, but can we like talk about like how you have 10 kids or whatever and like what you do and like how you manage that? Like that's what I need to hear. I don't need to hear every word that comes out of the Pope's mouth. That's whatever. Like God will deal with his vicar on earth. Like please. I need to hear like how you successfully live in a family. Like that's what we need to be hearing right now. So anyway, I'm going to continue preaching my madness over here about Anna Maria Taigi. We are on chapter 2, which is the perfect mother. The perfect mother. Domenico's deposition provides us with information very much to the point. The servant of God, my wife, in spite of her love of austerities, took care during her times of pregnancy to make more food. She stopped fasting and refrained from overexertion. In a word, she took every precaution that her condition demanded. 7 children were born of our marriage, 4 boys and 3 girls. Camillo, Alexandro, Luigi, and Petro, Margarita, Sophie, and Maria. Camillo died when he was 42, Alexandro at 35, Luigi at 18 months, Pietro at 24 months. All are dead except the youngest, the 2 girls who live with me still. Maria is of marriageable age. Sophie is the widow of Paola Micheli of Mantua, chamberlain of His Eminence Cardinal Barberini. The servant of God suckled all these children at her own breast and took care to have them baptized almost as soon as they were born and confirmed in due course. Domenico made his deposition when he was 91 years old. His memory, usually faithful, seems to have failed him here. There was some confusion as to the ages and the names of the kids. Okay, so Sophie adds some delightful details. My mother brought up her children and at the age of 6 or 7 years old had them confirmed. Earlier still if they were ailing. Mauritia was confirmed at the age of 5 when the French invasion carried fears of the expulsion of the bishops. After a course of catechism, there was First Communion at the age of 12, the customary age, and a continuing the spiritual formation of the children. On rising in the morning, family prayers. After supper, the rosary. On our knees with a reading from the life of the saint of the day. Sometimes we sang a hymn, and then after receiving our parents' blessing, we went to bed. The girls in one room, the boys in another. Further privacy was gained by shutting off each bed with curtains. On Sunday and holidays, we all went to Mass with a sermon. Then Anna made the girls accompany her to the hospital to train them in the ways of charity. She never allowed the girls to go anywhere unless their mother or grandmother or Luigi accompanied them. As to these outings, Cardinal Pedicini makes a remark which, coming from a Roman, has its unconscious humor. Anna refused to visit the museums where Domenico wanted to take her and even the children. She knew, says the cardinal, that galleries and museums contain indecent objects, even one must admit in the city of Rome. The churches themselves are not even free of such things. One of the allocutions which the servant of God heard had reference to the representations of children in an indecently naked condition. As the poor woman contemplated the mystery of the incarnation in front of a picture in the church of St. Sylvester, Our Lady complained of this abuse, which is at variance alike with holy purity and the gospel facts. Here is a further deposition of Sophie. Our mother trained us to be always busy. It was a habit which developed into a necessity. Even Maricia, Domenico's darling, could not remain idle a minute. She was always at work, either for some small reward or out of pure charity. She used to say, laziness is the mother of all the vices. Mama loved us tenderly and with an equal love that had no favorites. She used the stick if necessary, but in moderation, and preferred to make us go without our dinner or to put us on dry bread. The method was successful. The decree of beatification notes that the children of Anna will call her blessed. All of them were good Catholics and lowly working folk. For the Beata never consented that they should leave the class in which they were born, although friends made numerous alluring offers. They were not saints. Holiness is not hereditary, like the cast of one's face or the color of one's hair. Camilla was apprenticed to a barber and Alessandro to a hatter. Alessandro was the pet of Grandma Santa, given to card playing. On feast days, he played ducks and drakes with the money he had and the money he had not. Grandma was there to pay his debts, and to that end would deprive herself of snuff. The Beata warned her she would go to purgatory for this sin and thus induce her to stop her misplaced charity. As a further precaution, she asked the master hatter to let her know whenever his apprentice was absent. So it came to pass that he was cured. He became in due time a small owner himself, was married, and died of phthisis at the age of 50 years. Camilla was apprenticed to one Milani, model of barbers. Annette economized and advised him to buy a shop that would be his own establishment in the future. All was going well when calamity descended upon them. Camilla was 20 years old when Napoleon, having occupied Rome and carried off Pius VII, pressed his recruiting sergeants to send new levies for the Russian campaign. A system of lots was employed. Those who drew high numbers were provisionally exempt. Low numbers had to go. Camilla drew a favorable number that exempted him, but a crafty woman named Checha, who lived in the Shiki palace where her husband worked with Domenico, saw that her son Nicholas drew an unfavorable number. She arranged matters with the recruiting sergeant, who pretended that Camilla had drawn the bad number and Nicholas the good. She was so pleased with her artifice that she boasted of it. Domenico threatened fire and slaughter. The Beata kept silent and, hastening to the barracks, hoped to take Camilla in her arms and advise him for his good. Unfortunately, the troops had been hurried off and her child was already far away. Annette came back weeping and went into her little oratory to pray, and our Lord consoled her. Her son was not to go into the firing line, but to return safe and sound. The colonel of the regiment needed a barber and naturally chose Camilla for his orderly. After the debacle of Napoleon's Russian campaign, Camilla came home unexpectedly. The imperial armies, though not exactly a school for sanctity, had not spoiled him, and Annette found him a place as a servant in the household of Monsignor Mastai, uncle of the Giovanni Mastai, who was to become Pius IX. Fresh trouble was not long in coming. Camilla, earning but 12 crowns, fell in love with a girl called Antonia Pari, whose entire dowry amounted to 30 crowns, enough to buy her a dress. Annette suggested time for a reflection and prayer, pointing out that they would have a hard life of it, but eventually she agreed that they should marry at the end of 4 months. The marriage took place, and the young couple, with neither hearth nor home of their own, took up their abode under the Beata's roof, remaining there for 2 years. The daughter-in-law gave a moving testimony of her mother-in-law's holiness at the time of the ordinary process, but Domenico added that said daughter-in-law was the occasion of a great increase in that sanctity. She was a difficult character who attempted to control everything in a home which was so far from belonging to her that she was received into it out of charity. Alessandro was a fresh source of worry. Domenico narrates how he was put in prison for some trifling offense, and my poor wife was distressed about it, but kept her peace of mind in silence. It was during the French occupation, and he had, it seems, foolishly gone to play on forbidden ground. A zealous police officer told him it was more dangerous to walk on the grass than to jostle one's companions in the path, and forthwith put him in the gaol. But thinking better of it, set him free the following day. Like Camilla, Alessandro fell in love with a young girl of very lowly origin and very poor. The Beata, who had a better plan in her mind, was chagrined but did not insist when she saw her son was obstinate. The marriage was celebrated. The Taigi household surrendered its quarters in the Shigi palace to the young couple and established themselves as tenants in the Corso. For the Shigi quarters were altogether too restricted. In spite of this, Alessandro could not make both ends meet, and Anna had to send him some of the leavings from the prince's table. Above all, she unobtrusively mentioned work to her daughter-in-law, who, having brought but poverty as dowry to an already poor husband, yet wanted to live like a duchess. The Beata thus taught her two daughter-in-laws how to be thrifty and handy, the very pearl of mother-in-laws. She sent little gifts of money or food to them on feast days in order to gladden their table. Camillo was to die in the flower of his age of a malady of the chest. Ill herself, Anna Maria had herself carried to his bedside. Her daughter-in-law demanded a miracle, saying that her mother-in-law could work as many of them as she wished. But the Beata took her into her arms, telling her husband's place was ready for him in heaven. Let us too, she said, go in that direction. Go in that direction. Soon we shall find him again in paradise. Sophie, whose depositions are of equal interest with her father, Domenico's, is a very engaging character. The Beata put her in the care of her older teachers, the good mistresses, first near the Gesù, later at the school of St. Denis, where she remained for 3 years as a day pupil. She showed rare talent for singing, and her mistress proposed teaching her music free of charge, but the Beata refused, fearing that this artistic accomplishment might turn her head and set her thoughts towards the theater. She asked the ladies to teach her housekeeping that would equip her for marriage and motherhood. When she left school, Sophie went into a silk worker's shop whose owner was a splendid type of Catholic. On returning home, she was her mother's joy and eventually married a young man of good family called Paolo Micheli. Paolo was excellent in every respect, but he had no means of livelihood, and Maria Louise, former queen of Etruria and friend of Beata, promised to obtain him a position, but died before she could fulfill her promise, with the result that Anna was charged with yet another household. The espoused couple saw one another 2 or 3 times at Annette's home, and as with the other matchmaking, so with this a family dinner party, a good bottle of sparkling Asti, and the whole thing was settled. Sophie was to have 6 children. The household was an ideal one. Her husband got 2 positions instead of 1 as gentleman of honor to Cardinal Barberini and major domo of Count Cini. He died suddenly in 1835, and Sophie, her servant, and her 6 children fled for refuge to Annette, who welcomed them with open arms. Sophie was distressed, feeling herself a burden to the poor home, but Anna rebuked her gently, saying, "Why are you worrying, child? God will provide. Never will you or your children lack food." And so it proved. The Beata thought it would be a good thing for the young widow to marry again, and a desirable young man was forthcoming, but as Sophie disliked the idea of this marriage, Anna Maria did not insist. In the manifold illness which was to besiege her mother, Sophie was her nurse and her confidant. She died in 1867, 30 years after her mother, labored for her glorification, and eventually lay in death at her side at the Church of St. Chrysogonus. Maria, or Mariuccia, did not begin so well as her sister Sophie. Yet, according to her deposition, which was a long one, her mother left no stone unturned to give her a complete education. Anna Maria taught her her catechism. There was morning and night prayers, the family rosary, school at the good mistresses, till she was 13 years old. A retreat followed at least 3 times during the carnival. What more could be done? Anna herself accompanied her to school, or at any rate confided her to the care of Luigi Antoni, that good man whom we must certainly not fail to mention. He was elderly, a little lame, charmingly simple, a disciple of Anna's, by whom he had been miraculously cured, a faithful friend who delighted to do the odd jobs she gave him, to chaperone the children, to go shopping when Anna was too ill, to give alms, to visit the sick, to cure by proxy, through bringing them a wad of cotton wool dipped in the oil of the votive or watch lamp in her little oratory. But to return to Maria, the youngest of the children, and spoiled by Domenico, she was vain, coquettish, and lazy, and yet her father adored her. To touch her with your little finger was to risk the most frightful scenes. The little vixen knew it and took advantage of it. The saint temporizes, praise, expostulates now and then with all gentleness, and succeeds in the end, for Maria becomes a pretty girl, well-behaved and diligent, almost to equal Sophie. The devil's advocate blamed Anna Maria for the childish vanities of her child and for her silk dress, but Maria herself was there to rebut the charge, and yet with restraint. She said silk dress was, after all, black, which was sober enough color. Moreover, the silk was bought not by mother, but by her. Her vanity having got the better of her idleness, she had worked to buy a remnant, out of which she made the dress herself. Monsignor Natali adds his testimony. The Beata adapted herself to the character of each. She cherished their good qualities, mildly corrected their bad ones, and thus trained the children perfectly. Would that all mothers and all superiors modeled themselves upon her. Maria never married. She became the spinster aunt at the service of a multitude of nephews and nieces. A trifle given to grumbling, no doubt, for she took after her father, but with a heart of gold. She survived her mother by 48 years and died a very holy death in 1885, a member of the Pious Institute of the Sisters of Charity of St. Vincent de Paul, which she had joined several years before the death of the Beata. She was forever telling her nephews and nieces of the virtues of their grandmother, and they profited by her lessons. Sophie's 6 children were worthy of their mother and their grandmother. One of them, Marie Louise, who was 11 years old when the Beata died, entered religion as a reformed tertiary of St. Francis and died in 1863, leaving behind her a great reputation of holy joy and of austerity. The details about the children of the Beata have made us forget the appalling labors which were the price of their education. To feed this nest of at least 12 mouths, the Beata had to spend the 6 crowns of Domenico's monthly wages. 6 crowns would amount to about 200 to 300 francs of present-day money. This she supplemented with part of the leavings of the prince's table, part only because Domenico had naturally to share them at second best with the chief cook. This explains why Domenico found his wife still at work when he returned home at 2 or 3 o'clock in the morning. She was still striving to eke out the salary received in money and that received in kind. It was a distressing business. In addition, the Beata, over a period of 14 years, was frequently carrying or suckling a child and was herself the principal instructress of her little ones. Domenico, as a matter of principle, left the training of the children to her, and indeed the less he had to do with it, the better, for he knew only 2 methods, the stick or barely sugar. The gentle watchfulness of Annette contracted this mischievous policy. In the morning, so testify Sophie and Maria, the order was prayers, finishing touches to their appearance, for Annette believed in neatness, the journey to school, the return, grace before meals, dinner, and grace after meals. In the evening, rosary and other prayers, which Maria found tedious, said on the knees and before supper. After supper, a reading by Monsignor Natali from the Lives of the Saints or the Annals of the Missions, hymns, the blessing in bed. Anna remained behind, working and praying till dawn. To all this, Domenico adds a wealth of detail. She gave unceasing thanks to God for having caused her to be born in the Catholic Church, and she taught her children to praise him for so great a favor. When any priest came, she rose in order to kiss his hand and made her children do the same. The girls went to the sacraments each week, the boys 2 or 3 times a month. She looked after the children like the gentlest of mothers and placed them eventually in workshops above reproach and kept herself informed of their conduct. When she could not do the shopping herself, she sent not the girls, but Antonini to do it. These precautions may seem exaggerated, but Anna, apart altogether from her own experience of the dangers to be run, could see at close quarters happenings frequent and serious enough to put her on her guard. And Domenico himself approved of the strictness she adopted. When there was question, says Domenico, of Sophie marrying Maselli, my wife, in order to give the young couple opportunities of becoming acquainted, allowed the young man to frequent the house for a period of 2 months and to talk to Sophie, but she herself was always present. The marriage feast consisted simply of a family reunion at the table. Domenico further gives us the picture of his wife going the round of the little white beds every night, tenderly bestowing here a word of counsel, there a work of reproach, and telling all to be loving and obedient to Daddy, who was always working for them all. Then, after a final kiss and a last sign of the cross on their foreheads, she goes back to her work. I shall save your children, said our Lord to her one day, for they are the blood of your blood. Moreover, they are poor, and the poor are my friends. Yes, I shall save them, though they have many faults. If they did not all become as good as she desired, remarked her confessor, it was not her fault. They were all good. Indeed, heroic holiness apart, the most ordinary of them led a life of great Christian virtue. After all, neither the children of St. Louis or the children of St. Jean de Chantal were saints. One of the lessons which the Beata strove to impress upon her children was that of doing their work in an orderly and systematic manner. Domenico abandoned to her not merely the children's education, but the management of the home. I let her, he said, do the managing, for I saw well she could do it to perfection. Yet she desired my opinion before doing the slightest thing. She had hands of gold. I had nothing to worry about. She made my trousers and coats, everything. She worked regularly from 2 to 3 hours after midnight, yet was up at 5 for Mass and communion. When she came back from church about 6, she put everything to rights and prepared breakfast. When illness forced her to stay in bed, she set herself to mending linen and never remained idle. In 1799, during the French invasion and the captivity of Pius VI, provisions became scarce and extremely dear. People formed queues outside the bakers, waiting for hours in the midst of the winter rains. Domenico was out of work. Anna heroically undertook to provide bread for all. She made bodices, petticoats, half boots, and socks, but refused to let anyone take her turn at waiting at the door of the bakeries. In one word, said Domenico with feeling, she was an incomparable woman. I am an old man now, but if I were young and searched the world to find a woman like her, I should not succeed. I have lost a treasure of great price. He never tires of adding attractive details. Anna loved neatness in her little apartment, which was very unassuming. You would have called it a sanctuary. On the walls were holy pictures, chaste in style and devotional of expression. At the end of the room was an oratory with a picture of St. Philomena and a painting of the Madonna, before which burned the votive lamp, whose oil performed numerous miracles. Crowning all was a crucifix. On the shelves were 4 candlesticks and vases of flowers. Near the door, the holy water stoup was never dry, for Anna used holy water to sprinkle her children morning and night, and every time they left or entered the house. All these pious relics are preserved today at St. Chrysogonus in a little museum near her tomb. The most touching mementos are the poor work table at which Anna labored day and night, and the miraculous picture of the Virgin Mother of Sorrows with the dead Jesus, which is wonderfully moving, and before which the expiatrix so often sobbed. It is also a reproduction of the miraculous painting attributed to Guido Reni above the altar in the Pieta Chapel, a 2-minute walk away from the Chigi Palace. Anna established the custom of saying on entering the house, "Praise be Jesus and Mary." It was her greeting morning and night, the while she bowed her head with reverence. In all this there was nothing gloomy. She sometimes took the children for a walk. They visited some church or other, and then had a little delicacy in the shape of chestnuts with a little wine, in which Anna shared in order to give them pleasure. When Domenico was free, all went together to benediction, and often at night to some church where the 40 hours were in progress. Such were their relaxations. If anyone objects that this was a life for monks and nuns, it may be asked if a daily turn at the cinema or a joint visit to cabaret is a better popular school of thrift and happiness. And Anna often said that thrift and foresight are the only qualifications that entitle one to count on Providence. And how she needed to count on Providence. From 1797, the 7th year of her marriage, the Beata witnessed one public calamity after another. Bonaparte broke up the legations and deprived the pontifical government of its best resources, so that the Pope was obliged to raise his taxes. There was discontent and armed rebellion led by some French officers. The Directory sent General Berthier to occupy Rome, and on February 13th, 1798, the Republic was proclaimed and sacrileges and profanities followed. Pius VI, 81 and ill, was carried in the middle of the night to Siena, whence he was taken to Florence and then to Parma, Turin, Brincon, Grenoble, and finally Valence. There he died August 29, 1799, and the governor of the district wrote to the Directory, "The erstwhile Pope is dead. Now for the end of superstition." Wow, we thought we had problems. Anna foresaw these events in her Sunday after day followed the sorrowful Calvary of Pius VI, assisted at his death, and foretold the name and hour of election of his successor. Meanwhile, the seven consuls in charge of Rome succeeded only in delivering the city to hunger and to the depredations of robbers. Annette worked day and night, caused her children to pray, and invoked St. Joseph, very important, the patron of lost and hopeless causes. And I would also say exile. He could be the patron of exile along with Queen Catherine, right? Providence did not fail. In the midst of all the disturbances of daily slaughter, neither Domenico, his children, nor Annette, who persevered in going to Mass every morning, were molested. 3 months after the death of Pius VI, the conclave met at Venice, December 1st, 1799. On March 14th, 1800, Cardinal Chiaramenci was elected as Pius VII. On July 3rd, 1800, the French left Rome and the Pope made his entry into his ruined and blood-stained capital. And I believe this is important to understand this time period because I see it as a foreshadowing of things to come. He gave him a dwelling more fit for human habitation near the palace in the Via del Giardino. They had again to break up the home in 1817 to go to number 195, the Corso, where Monsignor Natali now came to install himself as a lodger. In 1828, still more removals, but eventually they settled for a period of 7 years opposite the Church of St. Ignatius at the Fiorelli Palace. They occupied the ground floor. Anna never had a lasting dwelling in this world. Domenico, his family, and Monsignor Natali had to leave this house off also after Anna's death and went to live in the Road of the Four Fountains. Alas, for the migratory existence of the poor. Why does not our devotion to the saints and to history induce us to respect the places where they passed and suffered? Annette maintained her serenity through all of these multiple uprootings and farewells. The soul, said our Lord to her, that lives with the life of the Spirit cannot always have his chart in hand, for it is thus worldlings behave, who fear to feel their feet on uncertain ground. He that trusts in me is richer than the kings of earth. It is not in peace that one recognizes the true soldier. For at that rate, all the world could play soldiers. It is when keeping guard he sustains the want of food and drink and sleep and fights faithfully for his king, one finds his worth. Domenico could hardly reach such heights, and he would have liked the saint to trade more on the esteem in which she was held. Numbers of distinguished people came to see her at home, and I used to say to her, why not drop a hint to such a one on behalf of the family? And she used to answer, let us place our trust in God, or other expressions that closed my mouth. Yet her confidence in God was so great that in fact we never did want for anything, not even in the most critical times, and for that may God be praised 1,000 times. Also, while she besought God, she did not imagine that the raven would come from heaven without her doing anything for herself. To keep such a large family without ever being in want was a perpetual miracle. The friendship with the late Queen of Etruria had for her was alone sufficient to keep us out of grave need, but she resigned herself completely to divine dispositions. In the most distressing situation, she kept silent, contenting herself with the words, may the will of God be done. When we lost our children, whom she had loved very dearly, she placed them in the shroud with her own hands, as she had done for her old mother and for her father. 4 of her children died before her. When our child Camelia was conscripted by an impostor, she was unable to speak for a long time. She was grievously distressed, but remained resigned and complained of nobody, not even of her whom had the grave reason to think was the cause of the fraud. When Sophie lost her husband and had no resources for herself or her children and was apt to complain, Annette remarked, how little faith you have and how little confidence in God. Do not be anxious for your future. God will take thought for you. God put his sign manual on this impregnable confidence by working miracles. One day, to the inconsolable grief of Sophie, her little Peppina tore the pupil of her eye while playing, and the doctor declared that the sight of the affected eye was lost and that of the other in great danger. Annette made the sign of the cross on the injured eye with the same oil from her St. Philomeno lamp, and the following day the child was able to go to school perfectly cured. Domenico was stricken with an attack of apoplexy. Annette put him to bed and laid her hand on his head. When he woke up, he was cured, and here is his own account. One winter's morning in the church of St. Marcel, I felt suddenly very ill. Scarcely had I returned home when I lost consciousness, and I was told afterwards that I had, God preserve us from the like, an apoplectic convulsion, not to say a stroke. When I returned to consciousness, I remember nothing of it, but discovered at my bedside the priest and my wife, who had her hand on my brow and was pleading for me with the Most Holy Virgin. Her prayer was heard by God, for without any human remedy, I recovered my health instantaneously, and there remained no injury and no trace of any kind on my head or elsewhere of the seizure I had sustained. I hold it for certain that it was the servant of God who obtained for me this astonishing and instantaneous cure. The parish priest, finding my pulse very feeble, had given me conditional absolution. Some time afterwards, Domenico was afflicted with such headaches that he was unable to work and walk the streets like one demented. Annette made the sign of the cross over him and he was delivered from the affliction forever after. It was Sophie's turn next. A malignant fever overtook her, and the doctor, seeing no hope, recommended the priest be called. Annette made the sign of the cross over the patient with a relic she always carried, and though Sophie was in a state of coma, she awoke immediately cured. Another alarm soon followed. Sophie began to have such violent pains near the stomach that she could not walk and could only breathe with difficulty. Whether it was cancer or something else, her mother prayed, touched with her hand the seat of the evil, and it disappeared. Anna wished her home to be a place where God came first, and God heard her prayer. She went to Mass every day and communion too. As I know for a fact, although I could not see her with my own eyes, except on feast days when I was with her. Then I saw her communicate and left her in the church after me. It was on feast days, if I had a little leisure, that we also went with the children to benediction or to the rosary at the Minerva. Morning and night there were family prayers, from which no one was absent. At night before supper, or as soon as possible afterwards, we read, now the life of one saint, now the life of the other, by the way of recreation. My wife spoke of God and the things of God, but she was not a bore, as some devotees are, who talk forever of themselves and their piety, or make a parade of their devotions. She laughed at any witticisms made at the table, but knew how to turn the conversation imperceptibly towards holy things. On weekdays, she worked and washed and saw to the household, generally with a vigor that would have tired 4 ordinary women. But on holy days and Sundays, she abstained altogether from servile work. She employed her time in prayer and having read to her works of piety and in hearing several masses. When the children came back from catechism, she took them to hear a sermon and assist at benediction and then for a walk. During the day, she did only what was strictly necessary, that is to say, she made the beds and cooked the meals. Thus did she see to it that holy days were kept holy by all the members of the family. At night, the family played hide and seek or blind man's bluff, or Domenico, to Anna's great delight, would try blindfold to catch hold of tiny Peppina. It was the peace of God, sighed Domenico. Okay. Anyway, sorry, that was long. What are we at? 38 minutes? Okay, not too bad. A little long. Who is in the chat? Mr. Joshua. I think he manages it by selling more books. Yeah. TM, are we talking about Tay Taylor Marshall? Yeah. And actually, I think he's got a new book out or something like that. But yeah, I would love him to write a book on family stuff. I appreciate his, apocalyptic stuff and his infiltration and all stuff. But I think it would be more helpful to encourage young Catholic families with advice on how he does it, because obviously he has a beautiful family. He's, obviously married. His wife's very pretty, and they have like 1 million kids. So I would like advice on how to do that. Thank you. Okay. Mr. Joshua, you enjoyed his last book. What was it? The apocalypse one, I think, or something. It was about the apocalypse. I think his last book was. Katie says, I don't know what you're saying now. Every round I'm at the start of the video, you're on speed. I'm trying to catch up. Okay, all caught up. Yeah, sorry, I was rambling earlier. I was talking about my gym escapades this morning. But yeah, we have to encourage each other. We really do. Especially families. Pray for families. Pray the rosary for families. And we have to model ourselves. I was actually talking about her this morning to my friend. I'm like, listen, you got to read this book. I'm like, you got to pray the rosary every day. You got to go to confession, and you got to read about the life of Anna Maria Taigi. And she's like, okay, I think people think I'm wild. I don't even care. And I'm like a mess in the gym, right? So like we're on the elliptical ride, like the elliptical. And I'm like out of breath. I have headphones on, so I'm screaming about Anna Maria Taigi. And people are like, what? They probably think I'm mental. I'm going to get kicked out. I'm definitely going to get kicked out. There's no way around it. But anyway, it's 11:08. I actually have a super busy day. I have to work. I have so much work, which is a blessing. But I'm like overwhelmed. So I have to end it. And I hope y'all have a great day. Joan of Arc Media out.